Hello everyone. Today we will discuss about the plays of William Shakespeare, the great dramatist of Elizabethan era. I am Rashni Veena, Assistant Professor, Government College Rawatwata. William Shakespeare's plays are a canon of approximately 39 dramatic works written by English poet, playwright, and actor William Shakespeare. The exact number of the plays as well as their classification as tragedy, history, or comedy is a matter of scholarly debate. Shakespeare's plays are widely regarded as being among the greatest in the English language and are continually performed around the world. The plays have been translated into every major living language. Many of his plays appeared in print as a series of quartos, but approximately half of them remained unpublished until 1623 when the posthumous first folio was published. The tradition division of his plays into tragedies, comedies, histories follows the categories used in the first folio. However, modern criticism has labeled some of these plays problem plays that eludes easy categorization or perhaps purposely break generic conventions and has introduced the term romances for what scholars believe to be his later comedies. When Shakespeare first arrived in London in the late 1570s or early 1580s, dramatists writing for London's new commercial playhouse, such as Curtain, were combining two strands of dramatic tradition into a new and distinctively Elizabethan synthesis. Previously, the most common form of popular English theatre were the Tudor morality plays. These plays, generally celebrating piety, use personified moral attributes to urge or instruct the protagonist to choose the virtuous life or evil. The characters and plot situations are largely symbolic rather than realistic. As a child, Shakespeare would likely have seen this type of play. The other strands of dramatic tradition was classical aesthetic theory. This theory was derived ultimately from Aristotle in Renaissance England. The theory was better known through its Roman interpreters and practitioners. At the universities, plays were staged in a more academic form as Roman closest dramas. These plays, usually performed in Latin, adhered to classical ideas of unity and decorum, but they were also more static, valuing lengthy speeches over physical actions. Shakespeare would have learned this theory at grammar school, where Plotinus and especially Terence were key parts of the curriculum and were taught in additions with lengthy theoretical introductions. Theatres and stage setup. Archaeological excavations on the foundations of the Rose and the Globe in the late 20th century showed that all London English Renaissance theatres were built around similar general plans. Uh, Despite individual differences, the public theatres were 3 stories high, built around an open space at the center, usually polygonal in plan to give an overall rounded effect. 3 levels of inward facing galleries overlooked the open center into which jutted the stage, essentially a platform surrounded on 3 sides by the audience. only the rear being restricted for the entrance and exits of the actors and seating for the musicians. The upper level behind the stage could be used as a balcony, as in Romeo and Juliet, or as a position for a character to harangue a crowd, as in Julius Caesar. Usually built of timber, lath, and plaster, and with the thatched roof, the early theatres were vulnerable to fire and gradually were replaced with stronger structures. When the globe burned down in June 1613, it was rebuilt with a tile roof. A different model was developed with the Blackfriars Theatre, which came into regular use on a long term basis in 1599. The Blackfriars was small in comparison to the earlier theatres and roofed rather than open to the sky. It resembles a modern theatre in ways that its predecessors did not. Elizabethan Shakespeare. Uh, when Shakespeare began to write, both traditions were alive. They were filtered through the recent success of the university bits on the London stage. By the late 16th century, the popularity of morality and academic plays waned as the English Renaissance took hold, and playwrights like the Thomas Kidd, Christopher Marlowe revolutionized theatre. Their plays blended the old morality drama with the classical theory to produce a new secular form. The new drama combined the theoretical complexity of the academic play with the bawdy energy of the moralities. However, it was more ambiguous and complex in its meanings and less concerned with simple allegory. Inspired by this new style, Shakespeare continued these artistic strategies, creating plays that not only resonated on a emotional level with the audience but also explored and debated the basic elements of what it means to be human. Shakespeare's Elizabethan tragedies demonstrate his relative independence from classical model. He takes from Aristotle and Horace the notion of decorum. With few exceptions, he focuses on high-born characters and national affairs as the subject of tragedy. In most other respects, though, the early tragedies are far closer to the spirit and style of moralities. They are episodic, packed, and with character and incident. They are loosely unified by a theme or character. In this respect, they reflect clearly the influence of Marlowe, particularly of Tamburlaine. Even in his early work, however, Shakespeare generally shows more restraint than Marlowe. He resorts to grandiloquent rhetoric less frequently, and his attitude towards his heroes is more nuanced. By the turn of the century, the bombast of Titus Andronicus had vanished and replaced by the subtlety of Hamlet. In comedy, Shakespeare strayed even further from classical models. The Comedy of Errors, an adaptation of Menachmi, followed the model of New Comedy closely. Shakespeare's other Elizabethan comedies are more romantic, like Lily. He often makes romantic intrigue a secondary feature in Latin New Comedy, the main plot element. Even this romantic plot is sometimes given less attention than witty dialogue, deceit, and jest. The reform of manners, which Horace considered the main function of comedy, survives in such episodes as the Gulling of Malvolio. Jacobean Shakespeare. Shakespeare reached maturity as a dramatist at the end of Elizabethan's reign and in the first year of the reign of James I. In these years, he responded to deep shift in popular taste, both in subject matter and approach. At the turn of the decade, he responded to the vogue for dramatic satire initiated by the boy players at Blackfriars and St. Paul's. At the end of the decade, he seems to have attempted to capitalize on the new fashion for tragicomedy, even collaborating with John Fletcher, the writer who had popularized the genre in England. The influence of younger dramatists such as John Marston, Ben Jonson is seen not only in the problem plays, which dramatic, intractable human problems of greed and lust, but also in the darker tone of the Jacobean tragedies. The Marlowean heroic mode of Elizabethan tragedies is gone, replaced by a darker vision of heroic natures caught in environments of pervasive corruption. Shakespeare's final plays hark back to his Elizabethan comedies in their use of dramatic romantic situation or incident. In these plays, the sobre element that are largely glossed over in the earlier plays are brought to the fore and often rendered dramatic, vivid. This change is related to the success of tragicomedies such as Flaster. Although the uncertainty of dates makes the nature and the direction of the influence unclear, from the evidence of the title page to the two novel Kingsmen, and from textual analysis, it is believed by some editors that Shakespeare ended his career in a collaboration with Fletcher, who succeeded him as house playwright for the Kingsmen. These last plays resemble Fletcher's tragicomedies in their attempt to find a comedy mode capable of dramatizing more serious events than had his earlier comedies. His style during the reign of Queen Elizabeth, drama became the ideal means to capture and convey the diverse interests of the time. Stories of various genres were enacted for audience consisting of both the wealthy and educated and the poor and illiterate. Later on, he retired at the height of the Jacobean period, not long before the start of the 30 Years' War. His verse style, his choice of subjects, and his stagecraft all bear the mark of both period. His style changed not only in accordance with his own taste and developing mastery, but also in accord with the taste of the audience for whom he wrote. While many passages in Shakespeare's plays are written in prose, he almost always wrote a large proportion of his plays and poems in iambic pentameter. In some of his early works, like Romeo and Juliet, he even added punctuation at the end of these dramatic pentameter lines to make the rhythm even stronger. He and many dramatists of this period used the form of blank verse extensively in character dialogue, thus heightening poetic effect. To end many scenes in his plays, he used a rhyming couplet to give a sense of conclusion, a completion. A typical example is provided in Macbeth as Macbeth leaves the stage to murder Duncan. He says, "Hear it, not Duncan, for it is a nail that summons thee to heaven or to hell." Shakespeare's writing also features extensive wordplay in which double entrances and rhetorical Flourishes are repeatedly used. Humor is a key element in all of Shakespeare's plays. Although a large amount of his comical talent is evident in his comedies, some of the most entertaining scenes and characters are found in tragedies such as Hamlet and stories such as Henry IV, Part First. Shakespeare's humor was largely influenced by Plato's soliloquies in plays of William Shakespeare. Shakespeare's plays are also notable for their use of soliloquies in which a character makes a speech to him or herself so the audience can understand the character's inner motivations and conflict. In his book Shakespeare and the History of Soliloquies, James Hirsch defines the convention of a Shakespearean soliloquy in early modern drama. He argues that when a person on the stage speaks to himself or herself, they are characters in a fiction speaking in character. This is an occasion of self address. Furthermore, Hirsch point out that Shakespearean soliloquies and aside are audible in the fiction of the play, bound to be overheard by any other character in the scene unless certain elements confirm that the speech is protected. Therefore, a Renaissance playgoer who was familiar with this dramatic convention would have been alert to Hamlet's expectation that his soliloquy be overheard by other characters in the scene. Source material of the plays. As was common in the period, Shakespeare based many of his plays on the works of other playwrights and recycled older stories and historical material. His dependence on earlier sources was a natural consequence of the speed at which playwrights of his era wrote. In addition, plays based on already popular stories appear to have been seen as more likely to draw large crowds. There were also aesthetic reasons. Renaissance aesthetic theory took seriously the dictum that tragic plot should be grounded in history. For example, King Lear is probably an adaptation of older plays. King Lear and the Henriade probably derived from the famous victories of Henry V. There is a speculation that Hamlet may be a reworking of an older lost play, the so-called Your Hamlet. But the number of the lost plays from this time makes it impossible to determine that relationship with certainty. For plays on historical subjects, Shakespeare relied heavily on two principal texts. Most of the Roman and Greek plays are based on Plutarch's parallel lives from the 1579 English translation by Sir Thomas North, and the English history plays are indebted to Raphael Holinshed's 1587 Chronicles. This structure did not apply to comedy, and those of the Shakespeare's plays for which no clear source has been established, such as Love's Labour's Lost and The Tempest, are comedies. Even these plays, however, rely heavily on generic commonplaces. While there is much dispute about the exact chronology of Shakespeare's plays, the plays tend to fall into three main stylistic groupings. The first major grouping of his plays begin with his stories and comedies of the 1590s. Shakespeare's earliest plays tended to be adaptation of the other playwrights' works and employed blank verse and little variation in rhythm. However, after the plague forced Shakespeare and his company of actors to leave London for periods between 1592 and 1594, Shakespeare began to use rhythm couplet in his plays, along with more dramatic dialogue. These elements showed in The Taming of the Shrew and A Midsummer's Night's Dream. Almost all of the plays written after the plague hit London are comedies, perhaps reflecting the public's desire at the time for light-hearted fare. Other comedies from Shakespeare's during this period include Much Ado About Nothing, The Merry Wives of Windsor, and As You Like It. The middle grouping of Shakespeare's plays begin in 1599 with Julius Caesar. For the next few years, Shakespeare would produce his most famous dramas, including Macbeth, Hamlet, King Lear. The plays during this period are in many ways the darkest of the Shakespeare's career and address issues such as betrayal, murder, lust, power, egoism. The final grouping of the plays called Shakespeare's late romances include Pericles, The Prince of Tyre, Cymbeline, The Winter's Tale, and The Tempest. The romances are so called because they were similar. The modern reconstruction of the Globe Theatre in London. Performance history. During Shakespeare's lifetime, many of his greatest plays were staged at the Globe Theatre and the Blackfriars Theatre. Shakespeare's fellow members of the Lord Chamberlain's men acted in his plays. Among these actors were Richard Burgess, who played the title role in the first performance of many of the Shakespeare's plays, including Hamlet, Othello, Richard III, King Lear. Second actor was Richard Cowley, who played Burgess in Much Ado About Nothing. William Kempe, who played Peter in Romeo and Juliet, and possibly Bottom in A Midsummer Night's Dream. Henry Kendall and John Hemmings, who are most famous now for collecting and editing the plays of Shakespeare's first folio 1623. Shakespeare's plays continued to be staged after his death until the interregnum 1649 to 1660, when all public stage performances were banned by the Puritan ruler. After the English Restoration, Shakespeare's plays were performed in playhouses with elaborate scenery and staged with music, dancing, thunder, lightning, wave machine, and fireworks. During this time, the texts were reformed and improved for the stage, an undertaking which has seemed shockingly disrespectful to posterity. Victorian's production of Shakespeare often sought pictorial effect in authentic historical costumes and sets. The staging of the reported sea flights and barge scenes in Antony and Cleopatra was one spectacular example. The result was a loss of pace. Towards the end of the 19th century, William Poyle led a reaction against this heavy style. In a series of Elizabethan productions on a thrust stage, he paid fresh attention to the structure of the drama. In the early 20th century, Harley Granville Barker directed quarto and folio text with few cuts, while Edward Gordon Craig and others called for abstract staging. Both approaches have influenced the variety of Shakespearean production system seen today. So, this is the history of the plays of William Shakespeare. Thank you so much for watching this video.